point is, should the royal family step in and say, you shouldn't be doing this, this is wrong?
It's a good point. I mean, I think they're out of control. They're out of the control of the royal family. What can the king do? I mean, genuinely, I think obviously when William gets into power, he will be much stronger on making sure that they do not do this to the legacy. But unfortunately, I don't think the king has the chutzpah to be able to put the foot down here.
I don't think Charles nor William can stop them doing it. I mean, you're right. They're not out of control, but they are out of the control of Charles and William. They're doing what they want to do, and nobody can tell them otherwise.
Welcome back, squaddies. Strap in, because today we are diving deep into the drama, and trust me, this one hits different. So picture this. Harry and Meghan, out here doing charity work. Real, on the ground, no cameras required charity. And the palace is losing its collective mind over it. Why? Because, as our script puts it, and I want you to really this, Charles nor William can stop them from doing it. They're not out of control, but they're out of Charles and William. They're doing what they want to do, and nobody can tell them otherwise. And that, squaddies, is precisely what terrifies the institution. Now, enter stage left, some young woman, clearly a card-carrying royalist, falling over herself to defend the palace's position. And honestly, for someone of her generation to be such a lame sycophant is genuinely jarring. Meanwhile, we've got to ask the big question, the one that's hanging in the air like a chandelier in Buckingham Palace. What is Willie going to do? Is he really going to stand there and tell Prince Harry and Meghan that is the royalist logic we are dealing with, people? And I'll tell you what, I actually applaud the one man in the room willing to stop the propaganda train dead in its tracks because somebody had to. The crown slips. How Harry and Meghan broke free from Charles and William's grip. And here's where it all comes to a head. Squaddies, because Charles nor William can stop them from doing it. Let that sink in for a second. They're not out of control, but they're absolutely, undeniably out of the control of Charles and William. And that distinction matters more than the royal family would ever want you to notice. Harry and Meghan are doing what they want to do, on their own terms, with their own vision, and nobody, not the King, not the Prince of Wales, not the whole creaking machinery of the firm, can tell them otherwise. This is the breaking point, the moment where the tension between centuries of suffocating tradition and basic human autonomy finally snapped like a dry twig under a royal boot. And what makes it even more jarring? You've got young women out here acting as lame sycophants for an institution that would discard them without a second thought, defending the very chains they'd never agree to wear themselves. So what is Willie going to do exactly? March up and declare that charity is his to pretend to do, and nobody else gets to go out and actually do real charity, on honest terms, with real people, for real impact? Meanwhile, I applaud the logical thinker who had the courage to stop the propaganda train dead in its tracks, because somebody had to. Royal rebels and the sycophant trap. How Harry and Meghan broke. Things why I sent you turn. Blind loyalty to the monarchies. It doesn't just dim your light, it's to it entirely. And that's exactly what we're seeing play out in real time, squaddies. When you've got young royals trapped inside this gilded cage of duty and protocol, forced to smile on cue and clap on command, the authentic human being underneath slowly gets suffocated. The sycophant problem is, it is, Because when you see a young woman in that orbit, bending herself into knots, just to please the institution, just to earn a pat on the head from the palace machinery, you have to ask yourself, at what cost? Performative obedience might have worked in the Victorian era, but in the modern age? People. They see the hollow smiles, the rehearsed statements, the carefully managed appearances, and that's precisely why Harry and Meghan hit different. Because Charles can't control them, William can't stop them, and nobody in that palace has the power to put that genie back in the bottle. They stepped out of the performance into something, and the institution has never forgiven them for it. When the Crown owns charity, and Harry and Meghan refuse to play along. Let's be absolutely clear about something. Institutional charity, the kind stamped with royal approval and plastered across palace press releases, has never been about the people it claims to serve. It serves the Crown's image first, full stop, end of conversation. That's the machine Charles and William have built, polished and fiercely protected. A carefully curated philanthropy performance designed to keep the monarchy looking relevant and benevolent while the cameras roll. But here's where it gets genuinely fascinating, and frankly a little electric. The real charitable work, the messy ground-level human stuff that actually changes lives, that happens royal sanction. Harry and Meghan figured that out, walked straight out the door and started doing it on their own terms. No Crown approval required, no palace communications team shaping the narrative. And squaddies is precisely what triggered the meltdown. Because now there's a battle, a proper ideological war, over who gets to define what meaningful philanthropy even looks like. William cannot stand there and lecture the world about mental health while simultaneously trying to dictate whether Harry and Meghan are to help people. The audacity of that position collapses under its own weight the moment you say it out loud. They're not out of control, they are simply, beautifully, defiantly, and no title, no institution, and no sycophantic press release is going to change that. William's iron grip. How the Prince of Wales tried to own charity itself. And here's where it gets truly jaw-dropping squaddies, because William, in what can only be described as one of the most audacious power plays in modern royal history, actually attempted to monopolise the entire narrative around royal charity work. Think about that for a second. The man wasn't just doing charity, he was trying to charity, to lock it down, to make sure that no independent royal charitable venture could breathe without his blessing. He wielded the full weight of institutional power like a weapon, pulling levers behind closed doors, using the machinery of the palace to keep a stranglehold on who gets to be seen as the compassionate face of the monarchy. And for what? To stop Harry and Meghan from going out there and doing tangible, on-the-ground good in the world, on their own terms, with their own resources, answering to nobody but their own conscience. So let me ask you this. What exactly is William so afraid of? Because if your charitable work is legitimate, if your heart is genuinely in it, you don't need to silence the competition. You don't need to build walls around kindness. The propaganda train, squaddies, has well and truly left the station, and some of us are done pretending we can't see the driver. Royal rebels, Harry and Meghan, break free from the palace's grip. And here's where it gets truly fascinating, squaddies, because Harry and Meghan aren't just walking away from the system, they are the very idea that the system owns them. Charles nor William can stop them from doing it. They're not out of control, but they're out of the control of Charles and William. They're doing what they want to do, and nobody can tell them otherwise. Think about what that actually means for a second. This couple is out here pursuing charity, on their own terms, with their own hands, their own sweat, their own conviction. And somewhere in a palace, William is presumably fuming because the unspoken royal rule has always been the audacity, the sheer beautiful audacity, breaking free from those prescribed royal duties, those hollow, performative ribbon cuttings and carefully staged photo opportunities, and actually a legacy outside the palace system. That is not a scandal, squaddies. That is a... And I, for one, applaud the logical thinking of any man or woman who looks at that propaganda train barrelling down the tracks and says, and pulls the emergency brake with both hands. The royal propaganda machine. How Harry and Meghan broke free. For generations, traditional media has been the loyal lapdog of the monarchy, faithfully reinforcing every royal narrative handed down from the palace, painting Charles and William as benevolent rulers, untouchable and infallible, their carefully polished image protected by a press corps more interested in access than truth. But then came the independent voices, the disruptors, the ones willing to say what the sycophantic mainstream wouldn't dare whisper. And suddenly that beautifully constructed propaganda train got hit with a hard stop. Harry and Meghan stepped outside the palace gates, did real charity on their own terms, lived their lives without asking permission, and the carefully controlled messaging began to crack and splinter right before our eyes. Because here's the thing, squaddies, truth has a nasty habit of emerging the moment you start questioning who's controlling the story. And when brave, logical voices refuse to play along, when they call out the absurdity of a system that tells a man he can't go feed the hungry unless William approves the optics first, the whole rotten facade starts to crumble, and no amount of palace PR can put it back together again. The awakening. How Harry and Meghan broke free from the Crown's iron grip. And here's where it gets real, squaddies. Because what we're witnessing isn't chaos, it's clarity. The old power structures of the monarchy, built on manufactured deference and carefully curated obedience, are cracking under the weight of their own absurdity, and people are finally waking up to it. Charles nor William can stop Harry and Meghan from doing what they're doing, and that's not a crisis of control, that's a crisis of legitimacy. When rational minds start pulling back the curtain on institutional manipulation, the kind that tells a grown man and woman where they can go, who they can help, and on whose terms they can show genuine compassion, the whole rotten machinery of royal gatekeeping gets exposed for exactly what it is. That royalist who stood up and said deserves every ounce of applause because he did what sycophants like that young woman simply cannot bring themselves to do. The monarchy has long weaponized charity as performance, and now that Harry and Meghan are out here doing real tangible good on their own terms, William's entire carefully staged narrative collapses. A new era of accountability and transparency isn't coming, squaddies. It's already here, and no amount of palace spin can put that back in the bottle.